All right, ladies and gentlemen, free radicals, Tulsi-crats, Bernie-crats, Indy-crats, and no-crats. It is I, Dave, and we are talking today about peace. Peace is what Tulsi Gabbard's campaign for president is all about, and also issues like Medicare for all and free college tuition, public college tuition. I'm going to talk a little bit about that stuff in the context of this article on antiwar.com, a website I would highly recommend. By the way, if you're on the right and you favor endless war, then you really don't know what the Founding Fathers said. You don't. You need to start to do some research. If you're on the left, you've betrayed your party's ideals from the 1960s and 70s. Many of those people were disparaged at the time because it was part of a cultural revolution and it was a peace movement, and at times it was a bit glib and it didn't carry the kind of rhetorical weight that it can carry now, because we've had about a half century to really look at it and say, you know what, those hippies were right. They were right. They may have just embraced it because it was part of the culture, but they were making a moral stand. And today we are so unwilling to do that. Military strength is our national religion. I bet you Tulsi Gabbard agrees with every word of this article. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not trying to project. If she were here to read this to you, I think she'd be nodding in agreement. That's all. So if you're a Tulsi fan and somewhat of a Bernie fan, this might be for you. Almost 18 years after the war, or perhaps of terror, there's some good news. The Washington Post reports that American troops are finally coming home from Afghanistan. Actually, let me amend that slightly. There's always a punchline on these headlines. They will only come home if Taliban and U.S. negotiators complete a deal by September. That deal would lead to a countrywide ceasefire. And if the Taliban agrees to certain other... It's amazing that we're negotiating with the Taliban here. It's just weird. But anyway, at least we're supposedly trying to negotiate with them. In fact, let me amend that one more time. They turns out to refer to the withdrawal of just about 5,000 U.S. military personnel, leaving 8,000 to 9,000 U.S. troops still in place after peace breaks out. For Donald Trump, who years ago repeatedly demanded, and see, this is why I no longer support Donald Trump, because this was too big of an issue for me to just ignore. He demanded that the Afghan war be ended and all American troops brought home, only to agree in mid-2017 to dispatch another 4,000. So basically, we're going back to the pre-2017 level of troops. Minus what? 1,000. Maybe. That's if the negotiations don't fall through. If one were to turn this into a riddle, it might go something like this. When is a Trumpian withdrawal hardly a withdrawal at all? Well, here it is. I knew there'd be a catch to this. On the other hand, don't let any of this worry you. The troops may not be coming home, but the wars have been on their way here for a long time. Here, again, if you're a libertarian and you care about the militarization of the police force, you ought to be supporting Tulsi Gabbard for president, number one. That should have been obvious at least since 2014. Local police using equipment off America's distant battlefields made such a public splash in responding to protests in Ferguson. These are people that are like this. Ooh, we get to use our new military hardware to put down these pesky protests. Now, I'm not saying all of the protests across the country were justified, but I am saying that many of the protests were handled in a way that probably made things worse. When you see armored vehicles rolling down the road toward you, that's a scary picture in America, on an American street. From thousands of troops sent to the U.S.-Mexican border to the Pentagon spy drones that have long flown over parts of the U.S., further examples of the growing militarization of this country abound. And why? Because we're addicted to war. And hey, these leftover military vehicles and so forth, they have to be used. We got to put them to good use. Police force can take them. And here's another one. Traveling in the stratosphere are these balloons, altitudes of 65,000 feet. The balloons are intended to provide a persistent surveillance system to locate and deter narcotic trafficking, sure, and homeland security threats. Okay, sure. According to a filing made on behalf of the Sierra Nevada Corporation, an aerospace and defense company, the balloons are carrying high-tech radars designed to simultaneously track many individual vehicles day or night through any kind of weather. Now, how does this relate directly? This relates directly to the people who support Tulsi Gabbard for president, because we're all looked at as kooks, as Russian agents, and people who don't understand the complexity of geopolitics and who would like the U.S. to disengage from the world stage. Well, I would like the U.S. to disengage somewhat from the so-called world stage and the consequences of bloated and incredible military budgets. I mean, if you scroll down into this article, you get some costs. You get what it would cost in just sheer numbers. $1.54 trillion over its lifetime for the underperforming F-35 stealth fighter. Now we got people arguing about Medicare for all. We can't pay for it. You know what? Okay. All right. Let me posit an idea. This one you might want to forward to the people on the right who just think it's blind socialism. Because you know what? Funding the military like this, to me, that's blind socialism. It's socialism that we're taking money from people where we could devote resources. It could be infrastructure, could be healthcare, could be education. We as a country decide those priorities. It's not socialism. It's what we all decide we want our money to go to work for. I want my money to go to work for my fellow citizens so they can be, healthy and have a decent life. All of this sort of hand-wringing about the cost of a Medicare for All program. I mean, people are saying, well, we don't have enough money for Social Security, and we don't have enough money for the current Medicare system. Really? Because this is $1.45 trillion over its lifetime for one military fighting apparatus. Land-based missiles, nuclear submarines, strategic bombers may cost already mentioned here over $1.7 trillion. And the new and malfunctioning aircraft carriers cost us more than $10 billion each. And all such weaponry requests get funded, here's the punchline, with few questions asked, despite a history of their redundancy, ridiculously high price, regular cost overruns, and mediocre performance. Meanwhile, Americans squabble bitterly over a few $100 million for the arts and the humanities. Heck, that's not even a high priority, but I would say I would take the arts and the humanities over this. I mean, and it's wasteful because they know they're going to get, efficiency goes down, incentives go down for people to create good products when they know they're going to get paid. And that's socialism. That's pure socialism. All right? If you know at your job you can't get fired, who cares what kind of work you do? You're not incentivized to do good work because you know you're going to get paid. this military-industrial complex, this is how they've operated for decades now. Decades. And they basically outline all these points like it's a profession of faith. Like we believe in all of these different things. They compare it to the Catholic Catechism. And it's amazing. A profession of 21st century all-American faith. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you value, is a telling phrase linked to Joe Biden. And in those same terms, there's no question that the American government, what they value most, it's military. They don't value your health. They don't value your education. They don't value if you can get food and your kids aren't hungry all the time. They don't value any of those things. And this is why I tend to side with the true, real progressives who aren't tribalists, who certainly care about the well-being of other people. Because to me, it's morally reprehensible that people will blindly support the military. So some of their points here. We believe in wars. We believe in weaponry. We believe in weapons of mass destruction. In other words, we should have all the weapons of mass destruction. And we should make up stories about other countries that have them so we can use ours and go in there and blow the place up and then go and rebuild it. And then try to remake it in our image, of course, failing every single time we do that. We believe with missionary zeal in our military and to seek to establish our faith everywhere. And you see it in the culture, the movies, the television shows, the books, everything, and sometimes it really breaks my heart. You go to a dollar store and you go buy something and they're like, hey, would you like to give, a dollar item, donate a dollar item to a needy military kid whose, parents are in the military? And I'm like, you know what? I told the cashier one time, I said, you know what? I said, if this was a needy kid in the inner city of Fort Myers, near where I live here in Florida, I would say, by all means, every single time I go through there, I'm going to donate something to that needy kid. Because that needy kid, I guarantee you, is far more needy than the needy kids of military families. And I'm not disparaging kids of military families. And look, I know a lot of these grunt military people, they don't get paid that well for the risk they take. But I'm just pointing out that we've prioritized the military in a way where we just blindly think, oh yeah, this is the greatest cause, giving to military families and their kids. Well, what about some inner kitty, cats too, they're important. No, inner city kids, black and brown kids who don't have anything. What about them? What about them? How come the Dollar Tree isn't giving money to those kids? And other organizations throughout this country that at the checkout say, hey, this goes to some charity you've never heard of, and we need to be charitable at home first. Okay? That was the whole idea of putting Americans first, putting humanity first, as Andrew Yang likes to say. One final thought on this, all right? So you've got this expenditure here, $1.7 trillion. Say the costs for Medicare for all are truly too expensive. We'll take the conservative talking point, the Republican talking point, as Bernie Sanders says, and he's got to stop saying that. You've got to just explain what it is. If they're going to hit you with this question, you know it's coming, Bernie. You know it's coming, Tulsi. Have some numbers. Have some facts. Talk about what it would save people. Talk about, like the St. Jude's model. When people walk into St. Jude's Hospital, by the way, I give a little portion of my PayPal revenue from this channel to St. Jude, and I just throw it in there because when you walk into a St. Jude facility, all right, when you walk into the facility, you don't have to worry about what it's going to cost you. It's taken off the table. Those worries are gone. So families, their kids have cancer, and it's an aggressive cancer. They're not going to walk in there and worry about how am I going to pay for this. My life savings will be gone. I will be ruined financially. I will lose my house possibly, because I've heard all of those stories. I've heard them over and over again. So here's my idea as the radical independent. You know how you hear about a slush fund all the time? Like, this person has a slush fund, or the government is putting money into a slush fund. And typically, when you hear the term slush fund, it's more of a pejorative. But we could turn it around. What about a catastrophic healthcare slush fund that any American could access? And money, instead of bringing these military vehicles back home or whatever, sell them off to, private things or whatever, so long as it's not a police force. Maybe some guy wants to buy this because he wants to be all bravado or whatever it is. His testosterone levels are low and he needs to feel as though he's a true man, or it's just some lame thing like that. But I'm sure you could just dismantle the parts, whatever. You could raise a ton of money for a catastrophic healthcare slush fund. Or you could raise a ton of money for a college-bound person who has no way to finance it and doesn't want to work as they're going to college. I know a lot of people say, well, that's how I got through school. Well, they should be focused on education, and they should be fast-tracking through, and not necessarily in 4 years. How about 2 years and get them into the workforce where they can actually start earning money, and at the end of their education, not have to worry about paying back this enormous student loan. So you could have, like I said, the slush fund for the healthcare, I think, would be awesome. And it would be for catastrophic, you hear about people that get these crazy diagnosis and now they're like stuck. Like, how am I going to do this? I can't pay the deductible, all right, to start with. The premiums are ridiculous. And my only choice is to go to the emergency room. But yet, they're not going to do chemo and do treatments and so forth if it's cancer. We should have, and we could have enough money in this fund to take care of everybody who needs it. And then the rest of just regular general health insurance could easily be free. Based, and you could call it Medicare for All. You can give it another name. It solves the problem. So healthcare slush fund instead of $1.7 trillion for malfunctioning military equipment. Yeah. I mean, we are spending, I think Tulsi Gabbard said we're spending about $4 billion a month in Afghanistan. That's just one theater. $4 billion a month. And nothing about how much money it takes to maintain every single military base all around the world, which it's mind-boggling. And like they said about arguing about the arts and the humanities here, and we argue. We're all like, oh, how are we going to pay? This is why Jimmy Dore gets incensed. He's like, really? You're gonna tell people, no, you can't have health care. We can't save your house. We're going to bail out a bank instead. And there could be a fund for people that hit hard times. They lose their job or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying free stuff for everybody. That's not what I'm trying to say. And you could call it like a safety net for average citizens, but we need to take care of one another. That's the whole point. Government is supposed to be there to be kind of a protector, right? So if Americans fall on hard times, you don't permanently have to fund everybody in every case, but the college thing would be an easy funding. It would be very easy to fund that. And the healthcare, again, if you didn't want to do a full-blown Medicare for all, you'd have a catastrophic fund ready for people like the St. Jude model, where you walk into the hospital and you don't have to worry about anything. It's taken care of. And by the way, it's not crappy healthcare either. It's Cadillac. It's you walk in and you get the best doctors. Why? Because those doctors are going to get paid. The fund is going to take care of them. You won't have this huge waiting period. A lot of times the reimbursing, that takes a while in the healthcare industry. My wife works there in it, and she vouches for that. She tells me all the time, a lot of times the current Medicare system is a bit slow, and doctors, they take it, but they're not happy about it, and so forth. They do eventually get paid, but in a system where there'd be plenty of money just devoted and dedicated for that one purpose, if we just learned to do without so much military. And we wouldn't have to eliminate. It's not like I'm asking people, hey, let's get rid of our military completely. No, we need a lean, mean military, and we don't need to be all over the world imposing our ridiculous values, which have become more perverted and more profane and more toxic as time goes on. What are we going to export to other countries? Political tribalism? Is that what we're exporting? And we're calling other places third world when we're slowly, in a political sense, getting there because we can't even agree on things like taking care of our own citizens who may have fallen on hard times, or we just might want a system where people actually have a better quality of life. I know that's crazy for poor people, for instance, to have a decent quality of life, but wasn't that kind of like the American dream years ago? And it's flipped on its head because all the wealth has been concentrated up high, and all of the tax money that we're paying is going to this. It's going all into this. And you can see these numbers. And by the way, if you look up the Pentagon, misplaced a few $1 trillion. There have been several articles written about that. Just it's an accounting glitch. If that had happened to you or I, the IRS would not only seize everything we own, probably, but your life would be turned into a living hell. And, you'd lose everything. If you had a family, who knows what would happen to you? But yet, there's no penalty. There's no consequences if the government does the stuff that they are, cracking down on regular citizens for doing, and most of the time not on purpose. Most people aren't tax evaders. Most people just... The whole tax code is so complicated, and this is a left-right issue, maybe more of a right issue, but the tax code is just way too complicated, and it should be easy, and they make it complicated on purpose so people screw up so they can come in and do this kind of authoritarianism, which is out of control. So a lot to think about there. Tulsi Gabbard, she's the only candidate, and then Bernie. But Tulsi Gabbard, she's going after this stuff. She's the one that understands this. She understands the numbers, but she's also been on the ground, and she understands the people. She understands that you put people in harm's way for a cause that isn't worthy, and that's one of the worst things your government can do to you. Absolutely one of the worst things. It's like being drafted. I think the draft is one of the worst things your country could do to you as well. Hey, come fight, fight for your country, be patriotic, because we're all going to die if you don't. And especially in the case of Vietnam, the draft, you were being drafted to basically go and meet your maker. That's what you were doing, or possibly meet your maker. And then if you didn't meet your maker, then your life after coming home was a nightmare. So your government turned your life into a nightmare. We need to get away from that model. Right now we have a volunteer military, and the volunteer military deserve better than this. Their missions should be noble causes where America's vital national interests are being threatened. Not this endless war in Afghanistan that's costing us trillions of dollars. I tell you folks, the slush fund idea would work. It would work, and I can't see how anybody on the left or the right could disagree with that, but depends where your compassion is. Depends where your heart is. I know Tulsi Gabbard's heart is in aloha and for serving her country, because she's off now serving her country, and she's getting a bunch of crap from all of the political observers right now, and it's just an amazing thing to watch. We have changed a lot as a people, and we need to change back. So there you go. Very long video, but very important that we discuss this topic. This article by William J. Astor and Tom Engelhart is definitely worth reading. Antiwar.com. See you soon.